So we have 20 minutes, and as you can see, Andy is a fast talker. So I think we can get quite a number of questions in. So it's over to you on the floor, and don't be afraid, because he can take anything. If you'd like to put your hands up. Okay, so 2 over here, please. Thank you. I can't see it over that. If you could, that'd be very kind. So just say who you are, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sophie Mitchell, and I'm representing the Student Christian Movement. I was just wondering how you deal with, obviously Christian politics is like a partisan. How do you deal with coming out of a meeting with one politician when they've used a piece of scripture to legitimise their view, and then you go into another meeting with another politician that uses the same scripture to legitimise completely the opposite view? And where does that sit with, like, without criticising you, your personal integrity or like the organisation's integrity with sticking true to the gospel message of justice and peace?
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sophie. And there was somebody else there? Yeah. Is there anybody over here? We'll take 3, okay, and then we'll go to you. Thank you.
My name's Edward Whelan. I'm from Salford Diocese. I want to ask, what do we need to do to actually get a politician to respond to an idea that we've offered them that could make a massive difference to our national way of doing things? When we write to politicians in the official way that we're supposed to do, if we're lucky we get an acknowledgement, but most time nothing happens. Now obviously I'm asking this question because I've got a particular reason for doing this, and I've been trying this for the last 2 to 3 years, but someone will one day listen, just like they did in 1948 when we founded the National Health Service. So I'll just tell you what I'm talking about. A National Employment Service, which would fulfill our requirement to stand by the signature we made to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, protecting people and their jobs. Now, okay, there's a lot to it, but somebody must run with that, just like Bevan did in 48. Who's got the courage to do it? Because whoever does it, it will make their career. And I don't want my name associated. I want to give it to somebody, give it to the nation.
Great. Thank you, Edward.
Nobody replies.
Thank you. Good question. Thank you very much. And there you are. Yes. Hi.
Thank you. My name is Siobhan. I mean, I'm thinking about responding to what you've been saying, and I mean, I don't know whether I'm the only one, but how does one? I suppose it's the place of anger in witnessing so much trauma and abuse in our society today, and how can you sort of align that with hopefulness and at the same time need to express the anger, that are directly linked with politics, the refugee situation, safeguarding and abuse that's happened during the pandemic. I suppose I think there's a need to be more specific about, what outrage that's happening in society. And to be outraged, you need to be angry. And also, the other thought I had was, Christianity comes with an enormous amount of baggage itself. And how one has a dialogue when at the same time religion and religious sectors of our society have also an awful lot of responsibility for things that have gone wrong. And just the last thing is, I remember being told, a couple of years ago, that the majority of Catholics in the UK buy the Daily Mail, and that's the newspaper that they read.
Very controversial, Siobhan. Okay, thank you very much. As usual, I'll just sum up, if I may, briefly. So thank you to Sophie, to Edward and Siobhan. So What do you do when you have two opposing political positions justified by the same scripture? How do you get politicians to respond to good ideas? And how does the righteous anger fit with your vision of hope, Andy? And especially when Christianity itself and other religions have a great deal of baggage of their own.
Great, thank you for fantastic and really, really important questions. Thanks so much. I'll start with Siobhan, and I think the anger thing is really important, Siobhan. I think it's incredibly important. And I sit here as leading an organisation one of whose mantras is disagreeing well. That we're called to disagree well. And actually that's because the pendulum in society and in social media is so far out this way and so angry in a way that we can't actually have any useful discussion about any subject, that actually we feel like the pendulum needs to head back towards relationship building. Most of the time in all the big sort of cultural wars in our society, it's not a messaging problem, it's a relationship problem. It's two groups of people that actually don't interact with each other very much. And so I'm unashamed about calling people to better relationship building, but at the same time, we're not saying that's an absolute value, because there were moments where Jesus was absolutely building relationship, absolutely coming close to people, getting alongside people, but there were absolutely moments where he was turning tables over, and he was telling people like it was, and saying it very straight. So we've got to be very careful. We never make that an absolute value. We sometimes, because we look at the culture we operate in, that we want to say, right, okay, we need to take the heat out of this, we need to build relationship here, because often good fruit comes from that relationship building. And it connects slightly with what Sophie was saying. All I can share, Sophie, is that it's very difficult to do what you describe. It's very difficult to go into those rooms, and it's painful. But I also see the fruit of bringing those people together. We have a set of, there's a gathering called the Show Up Gathering that we had in 2015, after we released the book, those who show up, and loads of young folks and 20-somethings and 30-somethings got involved and got engaged. And one of the most exciting things that happened off the back of that conference is that people formed into these long-term prayer triplets. Three in threesomes that would pray together, and we, as far as possible, tried to make them, one yellow, one blue, one green, one red, one independent, one yellow. We tried to mix it up, and those folks have continued to get to know one another. So there's this beautiful thing of happening, that these people are constantly disagreeing. They're constantly disagreeing, sometimes getting very angry with each other, but they're doing it in the context of relationship, just like any healthy relationship that needs a bit of anger and needs a bit of disagreement. You need, those folks are growing together, but the brilliant thing that actually we didn't know was going to happen is that those people are far better politicians than their peers. Because rather than the social media induced world that our young people are growing up in, where, to be honest, they're just becoming heroes of a broadly progressive subculture or a broadly conservative subculture, only good at making an argument to their own side. And as soon as you expose those folks, sadly often, to the oxygen of real debate, they can't make an argument. They can't make a persuasive argument. They can't persuade anybody of anything because they're just in their silo. Yet these folks are growing up, building relationship with folks from the other side or from the other three sides, and they are sharpening their arguments. It's actually helping them understand why they think what they think, and they're actually becoming better politicians. And so I have the joy, it's one of my joys, to get emails from folks who aren't believers saying, this girl Sally, she's incredible. There's just something about her. There's just something about her. She's able to make her case in a way that her peers aren't. And I believe it's because these folks have been learning their trade in this almost what you might call a safe space of being able to disagree well with folks from the other side, but who they're praying together with on a regular basis. And I always say, one of our classic lines is that when you spend time on your knees in front of the one who knows it all, it's actually, you're more likely to realise that you don't know it all. And it actually does render you more able to hear the argument from the other side that you haven't previously wanted to hear. So that's not to say that's easy work. It's difficult, challenging work. And so there are times when the anger and there are times when the outrage leads to a fracture in relationship, and that's just right and natural. But I think I just want to affirm your anger and your outrage, Siobhan. It's righteous and it's good. And we just have to make sure that it's directed in the most effective ways, that it's not just about us expressing it because we're angry. So often people express their anger through social media, and there's a real limit to how effective that is, because we are just preaching to the converted and preaching to an algorithm that really just wants to make us more angry. And so it's what do you do with that anger, and how do you direct it effectively, and with a political strategy, as Tim would often say. How do you direct it with a political strategy so that it actually gets something done rather than just makes you feel better? It's very easy for our anger to be selfish as well. But I think whether it can coexist with hopefulness, absolutely. Absolutely. The history of things changing in this world is when people have got angry. So we can be hopeful and angry at the same time. Those two things are not separate. So often, anger and activism and organised political strategy is what has brought change. And so our anger can coincide with our hope, because we've got history there. Regarding the Daily Mail point, that's just a painful, sad reality. Do you know what I should share very entertainingly? My wife's parents live in Ashford in Kent, and so we were going down there to visit them. So we're staying with them there at the moment, and so we had the joy of driving down the M20 towards Dover yesterday. And while we were driving down there, I saw the 35 miles worth of container lorries, and these poor folks driving them, who all have families, just sat there, 35 miles worth. That's a lot of lorries. And I just took 1 minute's worth of footage, just driving past them all, and stuck it up on Twitter and said, spare a thought for these folks. And for the first time in my life, a piece of my video footage, within an hour, I'd been asked to use that footage by the Daily Mail online and the European Broadcast Union. You know, the folks who put on Eurovision. And so I thought, do you know what, I think that footage might spin in two different directions for those two people, sadly. Edward, getting to your point about how to get an MP to respond, let's talk about that afterwards, because there are some MPs that I'd love to introduce you to talk about that. So on a very practical point, let's you and me talk about that afterwards. It's fantastic to encourage you. It's not impossible. You're not just blowing in the wind. One of the members of Christians in Politics, her name's Lizzie Jukes. She now actually runs the Liberal Democrat Christian Forum. 10 years ago, she was sat in her house wondering about what should be done with what she was hearing from Nick Clegg, from her party leader, was a windfall that was expected, and what we do with the public finances. And she had a conversation with a friend of hers, and she said, I think we should spend it on this. And her friend said, no. If you've got that much money, I know what we should do with it. We should raise the threshold, the income tax threshold. And she said, okay. And she went away and worked on it. She's not an academic. She's not a politician. She runs a tea shop in Chester and goes to a little Anglican church in Chester. She went away and wrote a page of A4 and how raising, and did some sums. She knew a friend. She got a friend to do some sums, worked out how much that would save, how it would raise people out of poverty by raising, you understand what I mean, the income tax threshold, so the sort of the lower border, that above, if you earn below that amount, you don't have to pay income tax. So the idea is to raise that amount so less people are having to pay tax when they don't earn very much. And she then took it to her local Lib Dem party meeting, and they said, that's a great idea. Why has nobody talked about that before? And it was taken to the Lib Dem regional conference, and it was taken to the Lib Dem women's conference, at which conference she got Vince Cable in the corner and said, look at this. I think this is important. And it got accepted. And it got put as Lib Dem policy. And she was like, I never thought this would ever happen. She was like so ecstatic. She said, it's wonderful, but I'm a Lib Dem, so it doesn't really mean anything because it'll never happen. And nothing will ever happen to it. But then she reports the bizarreness of what happened in 2010 with the coalition government. Tim remembers it with some pain. The bizarreness of what happened with the coalition forming in 2010, and then negotiations happening between the Lib Dem and the Conservative teams, and actually the Lib Dems having that as one of their red lines in the negotiation. And she then remembers standing doing her ironing in her living room, seeing Nick Clegg announcing that was going to happen. And she was like, oh, she was standing with the iron and said, that was my idea! That was my idea! And then a few months later saw George Osborne at the dispatch box, officially in the budget, raising the threshold at which people pay income tax. And it's gone up, and for the 3 years after that, it went up by another £500,000, and it's now party policy for all three main parties. And it's now much higher, and it's done an incredible, so these things are not impossible. These things are not impossible, just to put faith, just to put steel in your spine, Edward. But the more relational you can be, the better. I would say relationship, relationship, relationship. Less of the sending letters and emails, because MPs and councillors get thousands of emails and letters, and they would sadly always say that most of the rudest ones are from Christians. Yeah,
Okay,
so
I think we should move on. Sophie,
Sorry.
Sophie, I think your answer was kind of answered in the first question as well, so if that's okay. Although I'm going to allow myself one small comment, if I may, which is that I think there may be some of you in this room who, like me, do find it extraordinary that the Catholic social teaching is appropriated by the likes of Professor Philip Booth. I hope you won't mind me mentioning his name, who is a convinced neoliberal economic horsey, a strategist who now works for the Catholic Bishops' Conference. How he squares free market economics, rampant free market economics, which he supports, with solidarity and subsidiarity, I have no idea. So, what it shows is that, yeah, there's a battle of ideas going on, and it includes ideas inspired by, to be fair to him, by people who are inspired by the gospel, but go in very different directions. And as Andy said, we have to learn to discuss those things together in a good way. Okay, as you can see, Andy doesn't answer questions concisely. So, you have over to you. 3 very quick questions, and I will insist that he does.
I'll be better, sorry.
That's quite all right. Steve, can we have 3? So that's 1. Anybody? 2. The gentleman at the front, and then the gentleman at the back. So we'll start with Steve, and then yourself at the back. Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Please, quick fire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve Huxley, Joint Public Issues Team. Andy, thanks very much. I mean, we agree with you on relationships. I think it's really important for people to try and get to know their MP, form a relationship irrespective of campaigns or messages that they bring. Just a little query on the video. It seemed to set up a dichotomy, a suggestion maybe that there was either relationship or campaigning. And I just question that a little bit. It seemed to discount a little bit the letter writing, the sort of the campaign work that you can do without relationship. Nationality and Borders Bill, there was a faith letter, about 1,000 people, faith leaders writing on that. We've got good response from MPs who have talked about their postbag as a result and wanted to talk to us. So just wonder about whether you can give any more affirming messages around the campaigning side. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Please. Yeah, thank you.
Dave Archibald, Newcastle. Noisy, you mentioned you used to work for Ed Miliband. Did you have any involvement with the Ed Stone? And the other question is, if you have an Andy Stone, what would you put on it?
And then, that's a great question, thank you. And then, sorry, just the last one is right up the front here. Thank you so much, and then that'll be it. Thank you, please.
Tom Ormiston from Ellesmere Port. Justin Mathers is our MP, my MP, and he's known to most of the Justice and Peace group in the parish, known personally. And I didn't realise he was at a religious service in the House of Commons. It's very interesting to hear that. The other one is Lizzie Duke's Cafe is in Ellesmere Port, just down the road from where I live. The Grace Cafe was in it a couple of weeks ago. It's interesting to see what she did as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't catch her name, sorry. Tom. Thanks, Tom. Okay, Tom, Dave, and Steve. I won't run past the questions because I haven't got time, but I'll hand over to Andy. Although, actually, it was me that worked for Ed Miliband, and I can categorically assure you I had absolutely nothing to do with that stone. But I do feel it hanging round my neck even now. So thank you for reminding me. Over to you, Andy.
Oh, bless you. We can pray for Tim later. But I'll start with Steve. Steve, absolutely. It's always both and. You know that's why in the video we're saying we need the Elijahs. But sadly, as Christians, we have a little bit of a tendency to be a little bit exceptional. We have a little bit of a tendency to build our own subculture, and quite often we have a tendency to paint ourselves into the corner until there's nowhere left to go and no one left to go with. Our natural instinct is often to do the separatist thing rather than the integrationist thing. So I'm speaking to a culture there that says actually we don't really need a nudge to do the emailing and the letter writing because we're already good at that. But what we need a nudge towards is to integrate and to build a relationship, but we're absolutely both and all the way through any accomplishments. You look at the Jubilee debt stuff, it happened because people were stamping outside and sending emails, but there were also people of goodwill and Christians involved in DFID on the inside. It's always both and. You look at the human modern slavery bill, exactly the same thing. It's always both and. So we're absolutely happy to affirm that. And that's great to hear that, Tom. That's great to hear. Tom just joined those dots for us beautifully. It's great to hear. And Dave, what I would have on my stone would be, did we manage a just rewiring of the global economic system?
Wow. Well, I hope the answer will be yes. Okay, and if it is, it'll be because of all of you. And just a brief postscript on Andy has essentially said this, but of course many of you are campaigners, and as you know, that in the campaigning lexicon there are two key words: one's outsider and the other's insider. And the truth of the matter is, you need both. You need people pushing from the outside, but you need people on the inside who want to be pushed. And I think it was interesting, actually. A good example of this was around 2000 with Gordon Brown as Chancellor of the Exchequer, and Gordon Brown wanted debt relief for the most indebted nations. So, and he thought, I'm going to have I'm an insider. I, Gordon Brown, the Chancellor, I'm a mere insider. I can't get this done on the inside. So what he did is he went out to Julian Velikovsky and others in this room, and he said, will you push me? Get out on the streets and say you want debt relief. And you know what, if you do, I'll get that debt relief. And that's what happened. It was a combination of the two. Now, of course, we must never be colonized by our politicians. We have to sometimes keep a bit of distance. But actually, if you get the two working together, it's truly powerful. So it's inside and outside. And I think what you've heard today is a very passionate invitation, if you like, to consider to what extent you've been called, to what extent I've been called, we've all been called to get involved in this messy business that's called politics. And I hope you felt inspired. And for those who, as I mentioned at the beginning, saw the film just now, Finite, I mean, you'll get the connection. People who care enough to put something on the line, put themselves on the line, whether that's inside or outside, those that do are those that make the difference. And Andy is a very good example. So thank you so very much, Andy, for inspiring us.